坐下。好，今天晚上我们非常开心，邀请到北加州分会副执行长刘文婷师姐 Tiffany。好，有请 Tiffany 师姐分享。
好，感恩，大家听得到吗？
可以，
可以吗？OK，
可以。
感恩，嗯，敬爱的施工上人常住师父跟各位在云端上的菩萨家人们，大家晚安。今天很高兴有这个因缘，在文丽师姑的邀请下，能跟大家礼拜三晚上在这里相聚。因为上次我是用中文，所以这次我会用英文感恩大家对我的耐心，因为今天中文比较晚，中文可能讲的比较卡卡的哈。So before I begin, I wanted to thank everyone for allowing me to share my story with you today. As I was sort of reflecting on what to share for today on my journey, I truly hope that it resonates with you and the lessons that I've learned, even in this one short year, that may help inspire or even comfort you on your own Bodhisattva path. I was thinking about what to share, and somehow my mind drifted to a very particular evening. It was the evening of Monday. I still remember Monday, October 22nd, on 2018. I found myself sort of at the lowest point in my life. I was sitting on a twin mattress in a yoga yurt deep into the jungles of Guanacaste, Costa Rica. I still remember the air was very thick with humidity, sort of like clinging onto my skin like a second layer. And the occasional buzz of the insect at that time felt like the only reminder that life was still happening around me. But then deep inside the yurt, I was utterly lost. You see, just a month earlier, I had made this decision that defied logic. I quit my dream role as an innovation executive at a company on the verge of IPO. Now, I don't know about you, but I've come to learn that if there's one thing people agree on, it's not quitting a job when the big payday is in sight. I know people did tell me. I had friends and colleagues, even acquaintances who all had opinions. Well, of course, everyone except for my mother. She was the only lone voice reminding me to seek purpose beyond the numbers. But everyone else, let's just say that their words were instilling a lot of confidence in me at that time. I remember sitting in the night, listening not to the symphony of the crickets or the jungles that I was there to escape to, but instead, the voices of the doubts were in my own head. I couldn't seem to escape that, no matter where I was. I was hearing it say, you're not in your prime earning years. Why would you throw this away? Or how are you going to pay your bills? Um, why can't you just volunteer like everyone else on the weekend, like a normal person, right? Like you're still young. How can you just quit? How are you going to retire? Or you can do good, but it doesn't mean you have to quit a job, right? You have to be realistic. All very valid points, but honestly, my heart, my heart was pulling me in a different direction. You see, up until then, I've been living by society's definition of success. I was climbing the proverbial ladder. I was checking off the achievements like a grocery list. I defined myself at that time by the roles that I played, the titles that I held, and very much the recognitions I received. So from the outside, I had it all, right? It looked like I had the accolades, the financial stability, but deep down, there was always this gnawing feeling that something was missing, that something was wrong. I still remember one night I was in my house. in the office. I was sitting on the floor and I was reviewing this list that I had made in my 20s, and I review it every year. It was a list of everything that I wanted to achieve by the time I turned 35. And it was 1 year away. And I remember looking at the list, realizing, oh my gosh, I had checked off nearly every item: career, stability, personal goals. But there was one thing that I couldn't check off. And it was this feeling of not being enough. Not enough. I'm not enough. And I was wondering, how could that be? I mean, how could I have accomplished so much and still feel so empty? It didn't make sense. And that was the first time I began to question my reality. It was like this very tiny crack in the foundation of my very carefully constructed life. And that inner turmoil, to be honest, manifested in very strange ways. I remember finding myself being very irritable, more distant in my relationships, especially at work. I started to dread Mondays, despite having a job that I know others would kill for. The things that I used to find joy in, they were no longer joyful. I questioned my identity, but I still held on to it because I figured, well, I have to continue proving my worth. And certainly I didn't know myself outside of the identity I had built. So the more I questioned, the more I felt lost. And the more that I try to push away this feeling of dissatisfaction, the more it kind of grew within me. It was as if my soul or my spirit was calling out for something different, something deeper, but perhaps I was too afraid to listen. Then, of course, on March 18, 2018, something happened also on the 18th, and that would change everything. I was in Los Angeles for a work event, and I was involved in a severe car accident, and was enough to sort of shake me to my core. It was a wake-up call, sort of reminder that life could end any moment. And so in the days that followed, I kept thinking, oh my God, if I had died, what would I have had left behind? Like my house, my account, my title on the business card, or would have been the impact on the lives that I've made for others? And so in hindsight, being close to death was actually a very unexpected gift. Um, I know Master often talks about Wu-Tang, impermanence, but that night, the accident sort of shattered this illusion of life solidity and had me questioning everything that I thought was permanent. And the days following the recovery, I found myself sort of grappling with the fragility, how terrible everything was in existence, and the notion that everything that I thought was concrete could dissolve like in an instant. And so it stirred in me this deeper search for truths that endure rather than these fleeting moments that we often cling to. I noticed that the presence of death was very undeniable, not sort of like something in the future or some sort of abstraction, but more immediate, like ever present, ever powerful, always uncompromising. I release this notion of when we talk about 生老病死, right? How close this universal life force of birth is right next to his dark twin death. And so when I looked at the wreckage of the total car, I saw the sort of undeniable impermanence of all things. I had no choice but to accept it, although very reluctantly. And then so suddenly nothing in this world was as solid as it appears. And I came to understand that every physical object can be destroyed in a second. And even our thoughts, even the thoughts that we cling to, the ideas that we have will one day slip from our grasp. I would imagine when you and I are on our deathbed, that these ideas would be forgotten and faded into nothing like us, unless, of course, we choose differently. And so this accident forced me to face a very hard truth, and that was the very ever changing, immaterial, intangible nature is the only constant truth. And so I finally understood what Master what Sigong means when she says the only real currency in life is love. And in that realization, I kept returning to the question that now feels inescapable, which is, well, if I had died, what would I have left behind? And that moment of reckoning brought me back to my childhood when I was very young, growing up in a Tsuji family. I made a vow that I had long forgotten, and it was a vow to live a life of service, just to help others. And somewhere along the way, I sort of got caught up in the race. My dad would say, was it something 浑尘滚滚? 红尘滚滚, I think. And so I got caught up in the race, the chase for more. And the accident reminded me how easily life could just slip away. And it made me realize it was really time to create space, to rediscover myself, to remember who I was before the world got its hands on me, and with it, my purpose. So I left. I left my corporate career behind, knowing very full well most people thought I had completely lost myself, mine included. But deep down, I knew that staying on the same path, that was no longer an option. The accident had shown me that clinging on to the familiar was not going to protect me from life's uncertainties. I mean, if anything, it was a reminder that nothing is certain, like not the future, not even our next breath. And so with that understanding, I chose to be lost on purpose, to embrace the unknown, to step into the uncertainty, and most importantly, to live in alignment with that simple truth that guided me when I was a child. And of course, I didn't anticipate all the internal chaos that would result from this decision. So that night in the yurt, there I sat, listening to the battle of happiness that was being fought within the mind. So I sat there, like with my bracelet, I was gripping. I remember gripping the bracelet that Sigong gave me. And in desperation, I sort of whispered, Sigong, like Pusa, like, please show me the way. Like, please show me the way. And I sort of mumbled that I can't remember how many times, and the tears just started rolling down my cheeks, first slowly, then uncontrollably. And it's something quite beautiful. There's something very liberating about surrendering to the unknown. Even every rational part of me was screaming to return to the safety that I knew. But there I sat. Somehow I sat there, unmoving, determined not to get up until I got my answers. I realized that the quieter that I became, the more I could hear myself. And that night, I learned that when we fully surrender away from our likes and our preferences into our higher calling, when we stop clinging to the past or even grasp at the future, somewhere in that groundless openness of sorrow, the wholeness of our presence and a deep natural wisdom emerges. And so that night, I found my answers. And over the next 6 years, from until now, that path slowly revealed itself. Shigong's teachings and guidance have not only shown the way, but transformed it into this journey of profound purpose and endless possibilities. Her guidance always seemed to come in moments of doubt. And so last October, before I left to come back to the United States after I was wasted for half a year, Master had just blessed me to shoulder more responsibilities. Something she said stayed with me, especially in these moments. She said in Mandarin, she says, 要放下，放下过去的职业高薪，生活其实不用那么多三餐能饱，身体健康，生活愉快就够了。其实做事要对人生有意义的生命才会有价值，不然就如我说的那个故事，等到那一天，一堆黄土。Essentially, she's telling me, let go, let go of your past. Life really doesn't require as much as you think, Tiffany. 3 meals a day, healthy food are simply enough. And how do you start to focus on a life of meaning? Because at the end of the day, we all return back to zero, back to the dirt. Little did I know those words in October would serve me well and they would become my lifeline this year. Life sometimes feels a little bit like a video game. I feel like when we move to new levels, new levels comes new devils. And this journey has not been without its challenges. In February, I stepped in to the role as a deputy CEO for Tsuji Northwest. And let me tell you, these past 8 months have been quite a roller coaster. Um, in my previous career, my role was in transformation and innovation. So those were about living like 5 years or even 10 years ahead of the present. Like, that was my role. But here, some days it can feel like we're really playing catch up with yesterday. And you know what else is tough? Um, Building bridges between generations and also people from all walks of life. We have so many esteemed shigu shibos who are immigrants from Taiwan who have wholeheartedly dedicated themselves to the mission. Tzu is their life, and life is Tzu. I mean, you are all, to me, like the beating heart in the US. You bring tremendous amount of invaluable wisdom and the experience to our whole collective effort. And there exists a significant gap that we have to address. And that's something that is inevitable. Doesn't matter if we're in Tsuchi or any other organization, which is that as time progresses, which it does, we all inevitably experience challenges remaining connected to skills and practices and social culture and all the other things that progresses as time moves on and with new society and new generation. I mean, I don't even know how to use TikTok, believe it or not. Um, and so knowing how to effectively manage in a world that's going through such ever increasing change, I think about, even from the business context, this sort of infusion of new perspective is crucial, or even looking at our bodies. Like, our bodies must generate new blood to survive, and Tsuchi is no different. And, for instance, I remember when I first joined, my biggest culture shock, I mean, it's still a big culture shock, is the struggle to get a calendar invite for my meetings. I never know where I was supposed to show up because I couldn't operate with Line. Speaking of it, the number of Line groups are quite overwhelming. There are so many. I'm still learning, and each appears to serve a very different purpose. And yet one post can exist in like 5 different groups. So sometimes it can feel a little bit disorienting. It can feel like you've entered a different planet or a secret world where everyone speaks a different version of the language except for you. So you can imagine by June, just 5 months into the role, I was sort of ready to throw into the towel. I hit a wall, and I hit hard. I think this is why in October, before I left, Master said, 看你能不能适应. And I felt very defeated. Sometimes if I say, hopeless, I feel completely out of my depth. I often thought back to the very cushy corporate life that I had left behind. Now that seems like a piece of cake. And there were many days when I questioned my decision. Like, was I being foolish? Maybe I haven't cultivated enough. Maybe I don't deserve to be here. Should I go back? But then again, I also know it's too late, because you can't forget what you remember. And despite my desire to go back to the familiar and comfortable, I wouldn't, or undo my path even if I could. And then every time Master's words would echo back in my mind, 要专心回来，要放下，你能承担，就要勇敢地扛起来. This notion of 要专心地回来, those are one of those statements that didn't fully land with me then, but as I mentioned, it's now my lifeline. Master often says that the guiding principles to the Bodhisattva path is 信愿行, faith, vow, and action. that when we have deep, unwavering faith and we make great, selfless, compassionate vows, somehow the path opens. And as I continued that path, I realized that's precisely what took place. By the middle of this year, despite being in a state of resignation, I began to see these little glimpses of grace, these moments where I felt undeniably guided, just like that night that I was in the yurt. In June, I had traveled to Seattle to give a sharing, and I had no idea that this one single trip would spark what is now known as the Inspire Initiative. There, I met a few teaching alumni who also shared my belief that it was possible to preserve the beauty of our tradition, our Dharma lineage, while also embracing the changes we needed to engage a new generation. I met Shigu Shibo, who encouraged me to continue trying new approaches to address our volunteer attrition and engagement. So it gave me the confidence to try again. And I began to see that people, the right people, and the affinities emerge when we start to act with faith and vow. So their enthusiasm, of course, filled me up with hope. Those interactions were a moment of grace. I felt that was faith leading me in the right direction. And over the past 3 months, this group expanded from San Jose to Seattle and now beyond to Northeast and even DC. Sort of as if the bodhisattvas were conspiring for us, bringing the right people at the right time. And so, of course, these affinities rekindled my hope and determination, reminding me that, all of us here are never alone in our vision to see Tzu Chi emerge as this heart-centered international humanitarian organization that can lead the way with compassion and action, becoming a thought leader for contemporary spirituality here in the US. Now, we may be a very small group of only 14, but together we begin to lay the foundation for Inspire, which stands for Initiative to Nurture and Support Progressive, Inclusive, and Resilient Engagement of a new generation of young bodhisattvas. So today, as I reflect on this opportunity for the sharing, I feel like I'm seeing the path a little more clearly than ever. That night in Costa Rica, I couldn't have imagined where this journey would take me. I couldn't imagine the beautiful people I would come to meet. I call everybody Earth Angels. I wouldn't have been able to foresee this Inspire initiative, certainly not in this role, or even the rich lessons that I would acquire. But now I know that this path, the Bodhisattva path of service, of healing and transformation, is exactly where we're all meant to be. Back in March, a few of us went back for the US consensus meeting. And when we were there, Sangren Shigong also left us generations with 4 words. Shigong said to us, 守旧创新, preserve tradition and embrace innovation. And then she followed with 现在就是时候, the time is now. And I believe that with all my heart. Tzu Chi's compassion, this notion of spirituality through service, that's our IP. It's the antidote to modern ailment. I think the significance of her words lie in the understanding that while all of us honor Dharma lineage that grounds us, there is also an opportunity to adapt and grow with the times. Dharma is eternal, but how we live it can evolve. And so what's one thing I know for sure, sitting here sharing with you, is to have faith to follow your heart, even when you can't see the next steps. And most importantly, to have faith to make great vows and trust that the path will unfold before you. 信愿行. This is the path. This is our true strength. This is where I believe our true strength lies as bodhisattvas. And so I believe that if we hold on to our vows, if we stay anchored in our faith and allow the affinities to unfold, we all can manifest miracles. And somehow in serving others, we don't get to just change the world, we change ourselves. Thank you so much for the sharing and allowing me to be here and creating the space for me to share my story and my journey of faith, vow, and action with you all. Thank you so much. 感恩。
感恩 Tiffany 师姐的分享哈。那